welcome to Neuqua Connection. I'm your host, Alyssa Mulligan, and today I have a very special guest with me, my grandpa, or as I call him, Pop Pop. And you can tell by his uniform that he was a pilot. So Pop Pop, you graduated Notre Dame with a business degree. So how did you get into flying?
Well, Alyssa, I don't know if you remember, but I graduated in 1969 and the Vietnam War was going on. You probably don't remember that,
No.
but you studied it in history, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I was drafted, and I did not want to go as an enlisted person, so I went down to my recruiting station, and they said, "You want to be a pilot?" I said, "Sure, why not?" And that's how I got into it. And once I started flying, I just loved it.
Yeah, so how long were you a pilot then?
Long time. I started in 1970. That was my first flight, and I retired in 2012. So 43 years, basically.
Wow, that's great. So what do you like most about flying? Like, what was your favorite place that you've been to?
Well, what's great about flying is there is no better window to look out of in your office than sitting up in that cockpit and seeing so many beautiful sights that you fly over. I mean, I've seen Yosemite and I've seen Yellowstone, the Cascades, the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies. I mean, it's beautiful. So that's the thing I enjoyed most.
I bet the sunsets are pretty too, right?
Incredible.
Wow.
Really incredible. And the sunrises too.
Yeah.
I did get some of those red-eye flights, so I got to see the sunrise as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you have like a favorite place that you've flown to?
I have flown all over Asia, Europe, South America, Central America, all over the U.S. But I think my favorite place, believe it or not, is London.
Really? Why?
I just liked it. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good restaurants, museums. I actually one time got a chance to go into the House of Commons and the House of Lords and listen to their presentations. That was a lot of fun.
So how much time do you have then in between like your flights?
Well, it depends how long you've been flying.
Okay.
When you fly to Europe, you get about 24 hours off. When you fly to Asia, I can get up to 36 hours off.
Okay.
So there's time to do things. Within domestic U.S., usually only 8 hours off between flights. So there's not a lot of time to do things when you're flying domestically.
Yeah. That must be hard, though, going from one flight to another, right?
No,
Really?
the hardest thing to do is to try to get the airplane off the gate because of people boarding and problems, boarding the catering equipment and all those, getting the fuel, the proper fuel. Getting the lavatories dumped, that's important.
So what was the scariest situation and stressful situation you've been in?
You know, Alyssa, I really have never had a scary situation.
Really?
Yeah,
Must be a good pilot then.
Well, there's an old adage that there's old pilots and there's bold pilots. There are no old, bold pilots. And in addition, prior planning always prevents poor performance. So as long as you're ready to go, we're well trained. Most situations, you just have to manage through those problems, and there's really nothing scary about them.
So you've been through a lot of training then, right? So what did you have to do?
Well, I was in military training to get my wings.
Yeah.
And that's flying subsonic and supersonic twin-engine aircraft, doing all sorts of aerobatics and formation and instrument flying. And then in the airlines, it's just principally instrument flying and learning the new equipment that you have to fly. And then also I was in the military, I was in the Air National Guard, and I was responsible for all the training and the standards that had to be applied in my unit, my organization.
Wow, that's cool. So what was the most unique place that you've ever flown to? I'm sure you said you flew all around the world. What was the coolest?
You mean unique in the sense of, the coolest place?
Or unique like, it was just a cool story. You're like, wow, this is a lot different than your typical going to Florida.
Well, I've been to so many places, unique places, Kuwait City, taking troops in for Iraq, the Iraq War. I've been to Prague, and I've been to Frankfurt, and I've been to Rome, and I've been to Venice, and I've been to so many places, London, of course, Amsterdam, and then I think one of the coolest places to go visit, though, believe it or not, is Beijing, China, because of the Wall of China and the Tiananmen Square and the palace that's there.
Yeah.
It's really an amazing, amazing place.
Wow. So when you were in the military and like flying for them, what was like the most stressful situation from there?
Usually it was getting to and from the job, driving. That's usually the most stressful. You know, I had so many different jobs in the military. I was an instructor pilot first in a twin-engine airplane, and that was very routine. Sometimes some of my students weren't very routine, but it was a lot of fun. And then I actually flew C-9 Nightingale, which was it's basically a flying hospital.
Okay.
And that was kind of interesting because we actually flew military patients and Department of State patients around the country to the different facilities that they could get the proper care. And I usually had a doctor on board and a nurse on board and a team of medical technicians that would go with me when I went to pick up patients and carry them somewhere.
Wow.
And then in the Air National Guard, the C-130, it was just, you know, tactical environment, low-level flying, formation flying, short field landings, all kinds of kind of neat things, airdrops, both people and equipment. But nothing really stressful. It was all because of training.
Really? So even when you went to, like, you said Iraq, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I didn't really go to Iraq. I flew over Iraq
Okay.
because we would drop the troops off in Kuwait,
Okay.
Kuwait City, which is right next to Iraq.
Okay. Got it. So kind of changing subjects. So what is something that pilots do that the average passenger has no idea about? What's going on in the background?
Well, we do a lot of things up there that you're busy sleeping and eating back there. You know, principally when we went on long flights, we would plot our course every 45 minutes. We would be checking in with the company on communications. We'd be talking to air traffic control. We'd be verifying our position. We'd be checking our fuel, checking all our other instruments, of course, but usually there were warning signals if something was going wrong with any equipment. And then, of course, handling the complaints from the flight attendants that may have passenger problems or lavatory problems or galley problems and those, or temperature problems, definitely.
Yeah. So, all right, so what do you usually do, like, if there was, like, all right, how do I phrase this? So how do you, like, know where you are over, like, when you're flying? I never understood that.
Well, there are all different ways to navigate. You can navigate by visual, so you can be looking out at things that you're familiar with, or you can be referring to a map.
How are you, like, familiar with it, though, like, in the sky?
Well, just because of experience. I've got 25,000 hours, so I've flown over most places. And, you know, sometimes when I'm flying in the back of the airplane as a passenger, I could just flip up the window screen and see where I am just by looking for a little while.
Wow.
And I'll know about where I am. But then there's also a system called the Global Positioning System.
GPS.
And the military uses it, but it's also available for airlines, not quite as precise as the military, but and it tells us within about 20 feet where we are.
Wow,
I
that
mean,
is
it's
so
close.
cool.
Yeah, it is
so
close.
Is it, like, kind of stressful? I know you've done so many hours, but is it always stressful when you're landing as well, especially for, like, different airports?
Yes, it can be. I mean, actually, the most critical maneuver that a pilot does is the takeoff, because you're actually accelerating the airplane toward the end of the runway. Whereas when you're landing, you're coming across the approach end of the runway, and you have the whole runway to evaluate your situation. But landing's stressful only because of the conditions of the winds and the climate and Sometimes the aircraft in front of you will cause turbulence, and you'll experience that in the landing.
All right, well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're about out of time. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Alyssa Mulligan for Neuqua Connection. Thank you.